Welcome, everyone. My name is Joel Vargas. I'm a Program Vice President at Jobs for the Future, otherwise known as JFF. We design, invest in, and scale up solutions that transform the American workforce and education system to achieve equitable economic advancement for all. And I'm very excited about our panel today, where we're going to be talking about the prospects of transforming our traditional pre-K through post-secondary system and make it more equipped to work with today's learners and to meet the needs of today's economy. I'll just start by saying, in fact, we should talk about disrupting and transforming that system. It grew up during the industrial age, a much different time, a bygone era, not the era we live in now, which demands highly skilled workers, typically marked by, having some kind of credential that marks education or training beyond high school. And our system is not set up to do that right now. So we shouldn't be surprised when we think about it from that perspective that we get the kind of lackluster and inequitable outcomes that we see today from our system. So JFF, we're dedicated to improving that system, but doing that while necessary is insufficient. We also need to be thinking more radically, frankly, about how to redesign those systems. And one example of that, apropos to our conversation today, is recently we put out a paper called The Big Blur, which really challenges the notion of the traditional high school to college to career progression. And we say we should really blur the lines between how we think about that. So can we create institutions that are specially designed for older adolescents, roughly in grades 11 through 14, make sure that those experiences result in post-secondary credentials with labor market value, that they incorporate work-based learning experiences just as part of what young people do, and that they get connected to a career pathway. And turning to our panelists today, I would just say I want to thank them and acknowledge that a lot of the work that they purveyed over the years served as an inspiration for making that call. And I would dare say they're harbingers for more blurring to come of our system. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. We're going to ask each panelist to do an introduction. I'm going to ask them a question, and then we're going to start to play some games. This is kind of a game show format, so get ready, folks. We're going to have a little bit of fun. But I'm going to ask each panelist to start for no longer than 3 minutes each. Who are you? And please describe how one solution you're applying or promoting embodies an important change we need to see at scale to achieve equitable access to future jobs. Marty?
Okay, I'll start. Hi, I'm Marty Lange. I'm with the Cengage group, and I represent secondary education, so middle school through high school. And we at Cengage Group, which you may not be very familiar, is we serve all over the globe in terms of what we cover. Everything from elementary, middle school, high school, workforce skills, higher education, English language teaching, and corporate learning. And what's unique about our organization and our position is we actually traverse the entire construct of K-12 state and local institutions. We also serve the higher education institutions as well as corporate workforce. And so through all of that, the main threads of what we're working on is access and affordability. How do we really provide equitable opportunities for everyone that are out there in the marketplace? We do that through dual enrollment programs. We do that through inclusive access and Cengage Unlimited, which reduces the affordability for materials. We do that through new innovative digital solutions that are actually challenging the actual instructional model that's happening in the classroom, providing more pathways for learning for a broader construct of learners. And lastly, I would say we're also a big part of what happens in education through organizations like ours as a partner that streams all of that is professional development and learning and teaching for those that are in the marketplace to deliver the instruction. So a big theme for us is not necessarily about a single solution. It's more about being a connector and an integrator of those things across the different institutions upon which we serve.
Thanks, Marty. Isa, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Isa Ellis. I'm with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And so my work focuses on education and employment pathways, which pretty much means that we're focused on how do we create and accelerate more paths to careers that lead to economic opportunity and mobility, specifically looking at like what are the skills, labor market aligned credentials, social capital, and how do we help young people build the agency that they need so they can launch careers to make informed decisions about their future and their life. We're focused on primarily systems change, and when we think about systems change, we think about like 3 things in particular. So one, we look at what are the enabling conditions that need to be in place. The enabling conditions meaning like what's the data infrastructure that need to be in place so that you have system actors, K-12, post-secondary, and workforce actors working together. What are the narrative shifts that need to happen because there's no one single path to the future. We also look at policy, right? So policy not only creating more accessible pathways, but also financing and sustaining those pathways over time. So there's these enabling conditions. There's also in-time solutions that need to be in play. So we look at, from our perspective, we're looking at quality work-based learning that needs to happen in high school and in post-secondary, career-connected advising, as well as how do we create more accelerated paths to a credential by 13th year, so 1 year past high school. And so looking at more career-connected dual enrollment programs. And then ultimately, we also believe that in order to make this happen, you need intermediaries. Like you need these actors that are working within regions and working across the actors, K-12, post-secondary, and workforce, making sure not only that they have a shared equity goal, but they're working in a seamless, connected, coordinated, coherent way. And so you will hear me talk about intermediaries a lot because I'm a big fan of them.
Thanks, Isa. Paymon?
Hey everyone, Paymon Rouhanifard. I'm the co-founder and CEO of PROPEL America. Shout out to our team members who are here. So our work, we're a relatively young nonprofit. We help 18 to 24-year-olds from historically marginalized communities get a good job in healthcare that leads to career mobility. And the way we do that and the solution that we're very focused to scale is called Jobs First Higher Education. And so the way we think about Jobs First Higher Education is in 6 months or less, you are in a living wage job via an industry recognized credential that comes with college credits that critically can stack into a higher degree. And so that belief in this model is born out of our lived experiences. The majority of our team come from the K-12 world. I was a former superintendent of a school district in New Jersey. We completely changed the college-going culture. There's now a 4-year college pennant hanging in every classroom and hallway. And at the same time, there's been this dawning realization that there have been significant unintended consequences of that approach. And there's been a commensurate increase in stop-outs from traditional colleges where our alumni have entered the labor market with debt and little additional earning ability. And so our model is predicated on building a third-way solution, a quicker path to economic stability, because frankly, that's what many young people from poverty need. But it doesn't foreclose future higher educational attainment. And so we're focused and if not obsessed on building this model at a more significant scale and excited to talk to you more about it today.
Lydia.
I'm Lydia Logan. I'm the Vice President for Global Education and Workforce Development on the Corporate Social Responsibility team at IBM. Don't try to say that 10 times fast. I am responsible for all of our education and workforce training programs that we do worldwide, P-TECH, Skills Build, in some countries, STEM for Girls, and also our university programs that we offer. We are very interested in this ecosystem and knowing that people do not go directly from secondary to post-secondary. What is it going to require for us to have a system that really meets people where they are and allows them to advance? We're particularly interested in providing opportunities for people to engage in the tech sector and jobs in the tech sector who have been left out, underrepresented minorities, women, neurodiverse people, and veterans, and we're also in some places working with some refugee communities. This is going to require us to think about the system differently, how people earn credentials, where those credentials are used and recognized, and a system that supports the interoperability, portability, equity of those credentials, where they, are they being used in higher ed, recognized by employers, et cetera. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but that's where we are. We're a skills-first company. We have earn and learn opportunities. We've eliminated the 4-year degree requirement for lots of our roles, and that means we've been able to open up opportunities to work at IBM for underrepresented minorities. We've increased the number of women applicants and underrepresented minority applicants at the company, and we've seen it work for us, and we're working to see how we can encourage other employers to do the same.
Chris.
Good morning. My name is Chris Gabrielli. I'm from Boston. I have spent much of my career as an entrepreneur, first in the private sector and then for the last 22 years in the public arena, and excited about sort of the entrepreneurial spirit you can bring forward today. But I want to speak briefly, since we're talking about what excites us most in this space, about my secret second life as a policy bureaucrat. Any other policy bureaucrats other than Mike Miotti in the room? Okay, I'm speaking to a very small audience. Mike, let me tell you what I'm doing. I want to talk about policy enabling conditions for something I think is really important in the spirit of what this panel is about. So as chair of the Board of Higher Ed for Massachusetts, I kind of went over to the buy side. I was always on the sell side. I have an idea. It's a really good idea. You ought to do it here. You ought to do it there. I thought it'd be fun to once be on the side that I thought made the decisions about how things happen. I've learned a lot about how hard it is to actually get decisions to happen in these large, complicated political environments. But I was immediately interested in trying to break down the silo between high school and college. And I was aware that early college high school programs existed around the country. Oddly enough, in Massachusetts, the home originally of Jobs for the Future and arguably the first early college in America at Simon's Rock, we didn't have any policy to support what was happening a little bit on the ground. So I'm proud to say 5 years later, we have arguably one of the highest penetration states in the country already now at 7,500 students this fall who are high school students, almost all from low income and minority backgrounds in our cities that need it most, 39 separate programs, 50 high schools, the majority of our community colleges and so forth, where kids are relatively seamlessly advancing into college courses when they're ready and able, highly supported, pretty logical sequences of courses, and our early data analyses show us they are going on to college and they are persevering at higher rates than well-matched peers, which is really our goal. I'm really proud of that progress, and I've learned a lot about the challenges of the operating conditions. More recently, really challenged in part by Joel's thinking and Big Blur and others, John Schnurr calling me up saying what we were going to do in the middle of the pandemic about students who were stuck late in high school, caused me to start to think about how do we really make sure that students get to college and career success, not quote readiness or even exposure. And so we have gone forward and figured out how to get 5 districts and a charter in a position where they can keep students for a bridge year, where those students can stay beyond the normal end of high school, still under K-12 governance and funding, which is a key piece of this, so they can go far further and complete degrees if they're going down the early college pathway, or if they're doing something like a PROPEL, gain that certificate, that apprenticeship, and end up in the job. So we're now at the moment where we've had this sort of pilot program, took a lot of sneaky discussions to convince people that such a beast could exist, that a student could be one more year still in the K-12 system, although they were sort of K-13 at this point. Let's see if it can work. Now we're asking, how would we scale it in one region of our state? So we've been lucky to win a grant recently to help us think really hard about how we would have the majority of students in the not too distant future in one sector of our state north of Boston, where there's really a tremendous need for this, really universally or at least consistently enough, ending up not with a high school degree, good luck, but with either a 2-year degree or the certificate and experience in the workplace, such that they would be college and career successful, which I think is a much higher standard than college and career ready.
Well, thanks for that opener. Now you know a little bit about each of our panelists. We're going to start to play games here. And the first 3 contestants in our game, does that say Jenga? Yes, Jenga. We'll have Lydia, Chris, and Marty. Not necessarily in that order, but be ready. And the question is, this is the game where you try not to pull away in Jenga, that critical block holding up an edifice, right? I don't know if you've ever remember playing that game. But let's say that you did want to cause that disruption, okay? Which paves the way for the kinds of solutions we're discussing today. To be a little bit more positive, if you don't like the disruptor kind of frame, if you're trying to build something new, where would you start? What's the key building block? And I'll give you some choices, but you can choose one of your own. And please tell us, why would you choose it and why? Why would you choose it? What is it and why? So, employers, finance, accountability, governance, credentialing systems, federal policy, changing narratives, or something else? Lydia, do you want to go first?
I'd be happy to. Thank you. So I would go with credentialing systems because employers need them, learners need them, university systems need them, K-12 systems need them. Everyone needs a system that allows the credentials to sit there, be accessible, be interoperable, be recognized, and be portable and verifiable. We don't have that yet. So there are lots of people going out and earning credentials no one else recognizes, which means someone is spending money. Hopefully you're not going into debt spending that money. You're taking that to an employer hoping you get a job, and they say, I don't know who Mickey Mouse Training Company is, I'm so sorry, but we're not gonna recognize this. Or you're taking it to a college and saying, I went through all this training, this has to be worth some credits, and they say, no, it isn't. Sorry, go take out a loan and come take some courses. We have to solve that problem. We have to get to a place where the work people are doing is recognized, the credentials that they earn that's tied to that work is portable, that they can take it with them wherever they go, that it is recognized at the destination, that it is equivalent, that it isn't like, yes, you've done all of this work, but it's only worth this unless you did it over there, sorry, and that you can use it to continue to move forward. This is going to require every sector of this puzzle to do things a little bit differently. But if this is where we want to go and we want to create opportunity for people, we have to think differently about the system. We have pieces of it, and we need to build in the other pieces. We have some data about the job roles and the taxonomies and the frameworks that are underneath the credentials that exist. We need some translators to happen between credentials. We have some platforms that these credentials sit on, but we need them to be more universally accessible and portable. We have some ability to do the verification, but we haven't been able to do that universally. So we've got, bright spots, and we've got some of these things happening in pairs or triads, but we don't have it all happening together at once. And we need to figure out how we get that done. Some of this is a policy enabler. Some of this is internal systems, right, with an employer or with a university or with a training provider or with, their independent companies working on this. But we've got to get to a point where we show that it can be done, figure out where the kinks are, and then scale it.
Thanks, Lydia. Marty, you want to go next?
Sure. I would use changing narratives. How about a little classroom participation? Would everyone in this middle row please raise your hand in this middle section? All right. So we recently did a survey of all high school students and asked them the barriers to post-secondary education and said, what do you find to be, have you ever thought about what would be an alternative to a 2-year or 4-year degree, and do you have awareness of what that is and how to engage in that? It was 60% of all high school students said they did not have awareness of these other types of programs. So I would say there's a huge narrative to be had out there in the marketplace, and we need to be shouting it from on high. And then I would also add that on to dual enrollment, which is an effective system today. It is promoting real growth and leveraging both the demand side of what corporate is needing in the marketplace with an existing system and supply of seats on the career and technical education side. But we have a low level of participation in high schools. To be honest, we have about 2 million dual enrollment students out there. It's growing at 5% a year. Not nearly enough. And we play in the college and career readiness space, and almost the entirety of that is aimed at college readiness. Those students that are in that top quartile that are going to progress forward into 2-year and 4-year towards a degree. And as we know, as we're looking for more skills and credentialing and other types of things, we need to create new pathways, and we need to create leverage off of the systems that already exist. And we really believe that dual enrollment is something through an awareness campaign as well as state and policy that can help us drive that to the next level.
Okay. Chris, you want to close us out?
Yeah, I'm going to go with money. Maybe playing to type. I think that as I've tried to really think about all of these connections where we're trying to flip around systems that have become so siloed and so defined in internal rationales that make sense to the members of that system and are not focused, no matter what they say, on actually students and lives and impacts. The money thing becomes very big. because in particular in the space of the big blur, you've got a K-12 system that has universal attendance and funding. No one disputes that students should go to K-12 for free. While there's court cases fighting about exactly what the right amount is and all the rest, the money flows. And then you go into the insane world of higher ed finance, which I think everyone knows is impossible to pull together. And institutions are pretty good at braiding together lots of different bits of money and squeezing out more than every cent in their students' wallets to finance that. And then I don't even go into workforce funding, which is even more problematic. If we want to have a system that reaches the students who have been least well traditionally served, who have the fewest resources in their corner, we can't toss them out into that non-universally funded world and say, good luck, sort through that. If you fill out enough versions of Fast Fund, many other things, and if you know you're eligible for this program and that thing, and your employer in this state, you can find your way forward. That is completely unreasonable. And so one of the reasons I'm particularly excited about this bridge year kind of idea is it extends our obligation as a state and as government and our wallet to say we're going to deliver students to success, not to an arbitrary line artificially demarcated by age and alleged college and career readiness.
Okay, let me let the other panelists just jump in with any reactions, quibbles, amens.
I'd give it an amen. I'd also say we've got to get out of the this or that frame of mind. It's either a high school degree or a college degree or workforce credentials or this. There's no reason why you can't be earning and learning while you are also on your path to a degree. And then if you step out of your degree program for whatever reason, you're leaving with something that's still a marketable skill that shows that you've learned something that you can use, that you can go back and continue on your path. And I think we've been in this, like, the high school degree is a marker, a college degree is a marker, and there isn't anything in between. And these are long, slogs. I mean, I know this is like a weird aside, but my son is 5, right? He's taking karate. It used to be the time between a white belt and a yellow belt was like 3 years. They figured out kids wouldn't stick with it that long. They came out with like all these stripes. So now after like 4 months, you get a white belt with a yellow stripe, then you get a white belt with a green stripe. Basically, we're talking about the same thing. People need some encouragement. They need proof that you've gained some more skills. They need tests that show that you've done it. And then you walk away with something and you say, I did it, I can do some more. Why wouldn't, it works. We know that this works in other places. We just need to do more of it, and we need a system around it.
Amen. I'm going to move us on to our next game, but I would say that both and narrative change and then demonstrations of such are just in concert, have to go together. So really appreciate that. We're going to play next a game called True Confessions. And this one we're going to hear from Paymon and Isa. And the question is, what keeps you up at night about where your aspirations will either fall short or create an unintended consequence for young people, and why? So, Paymon, you want to start?
Sure. So I spend a lot of time thinking about unintended consequences. I don't know what that says about me. And I think, first of all, our country really stinks at centering the pendulum when it comes to complex social change. So I'll just start there. And, I described the unintended consequences of the College for All model that we led in Camden, New Jersey, where I was the superintendent, which is what led us to the work that we're doing now. And I completely agree with the narrative change. And we need to destigmatize third-way solutions, both-and solutions. We need to, in fact, valorize them. If we were to do that and the pendulum swings completely in the other direction, I think one pitfall is the role of employers. They are critical partners in this work, and the entry-level job is the starting point. And so we are really focused on getting our students into living wage jobs in the healthcare system with employers we've built deep partnership with. Oftentimes, the environment that surrounds them once we walk away and the training wheels come off can be treacherous. And so we've got to equip our young people with the skills to navigate those challenges, as all of us have navigated similar challenges in our lives. But there are also certainly responsibility the employers have to both support those young people from marginalized communities, but also to provide structural solutions. And one example of that is one of our reflections has been the lack of career laddering, meaningful career laddering at a lot of these companies, where there is this plethora of need when it comes to the entry-level job. But the next rung on the ladder, there's oftentimes a chasm. So you can get into that entry-level job with a few weeks of training. And then the next rung on the ladder is a bachelor's or a master's degree with very little opportunity in between. And so I think there's a lot there for employers, and if they're not proactively addressing those challenges, we can put our young people in an even more treacherous position.
Thanks for sharing that and your candor. Isa.
So I +10 to all of that, right? You can't do this work without employers at the table and co-designing with employers. So it can't just be educators talking to more educators. Like, you really have to plan and design with employers, and they do need to think differently around how they structure their HR practices, and also those hiring managers, right? Needing to train hiring managers to think differently about their employees and who needs to be at the table for that. There's a lot that keeps me up at night. I would say, I think the one thing that keeps me up at night most is we're trying to tell this story around having multiple quality pathways, but in telling that story, we have to really tell it in a nuanced way, because we still have this college for all narrative, or like college is the only single path, as if most people, when going to college, didn't work at the same time, right? And so I think what I'm concerned about most is in creating these like career-connected pathways, if they're not done in a very sophisticated way and designed well, it's almost as if we're creating this other alternative pathway, right? So again, creating an other pathway, an alternative pathway, and again, othering students, so creating another form of tracking. And so that concerns me a lot, because I think you have to design for all, thinking about all students, especially those who've been most and historically and systemically marginalized. And I'm just concerned that folks are designing pathways, thinking about one particular student population, marketing to one specific student population, enrolling one specific student population, and thinking that's not tracking, right? And so I think this really getting more nuanced around how do we create more accessible, available, quality, permeable pathways, and how do those pathways need to be designed for all students, so then students are then making informed options around which pathway is best for me, and making sure that educators and family members who are helping to make those decisions with students have enough information to say, well, this pathway or that pathway, or maybe this pathway now and that pathway later, or maybe you can do both pathways at the same time. There's no reason in many cases that students cannot take AP, dual enrollment, and a CTE in some type of like CTE program at the same time. It does exist. There are folks that are doing it across the country. There are folks that are doing it exceptionally well. The problem is that they're just not scaled, right? And so how do we understand these folks that are doing it? How do we elevate and amplify those proof points so that more people that are designing these pathways can see, oh, I can do this for my students also? So what keeps me up at night most is the tracking piece, and folks not designing with nuance and with more intention.
Amen. Any other comments from our panelists, reactions?
I would just say, as a designer of a lot of these solutions that get brought into the classroom and the complexities of, we talk about CTE as if it's one thing, and it's all these different career clusters with many courses and a lot of the pieces. And I think the key part of that is we have to really invest in professional development. Like the teams and the people on site, the administrators who are designing the outputs of it, but really getting people equipped to be able to manage, these processes moving forward. I was listening to an NPR a week or so ago, and they were talking about how corporations are coming into high schools and competing for students there. And the schools we don't know how to manage with all of these corporations in here, and how do we deal with work-based learning and those things. So that infrastructure that you're talking about, I think, is 100% right, and the pathways are so important. So creating this leverage off of the structures that exist, but investing in the actual staff and the training is key.
Can I add one thing that just came to mind you made me think about? Because, I mean, it's easier said than done, right? But one thing that comes to mind, and I just think about my time working at a school district, is one thing that needs to be completely disrupted. And if anyone has a solution for that, like, let us know. Is school scheduling, right? right? Like, high school scheduling models are just incredibly problematic. And no one seemed to have figured that out in a scaled way. So I was like, that is one very specific solution that if anyone has an idea of not how to just disrupt high school, but high school scheduling models.
Well, and they go further with that is what's the constitutes a course? Is a course a semester-long thing? It's totally in computer programming, or is it a set of modules that allow someone to come in there and credential on certain things, get a certificate, and get some skills that they actually graduate with? So I think the whole challenging of what a course
Are we
is.
sliding into a
That's
mastery-based
purple
panel?
smoke. That's purple smoke moment.
Sorry
Mark.
about that.
Oh,
have a
no.
lot to say on this
Okay,
topic.
one more minute here. Lydia, Chris, you want to get in on this?
I +1 to Issa. I mean, I can say as a black woman, what keeps me up at night is making sure this does not become the new busing. We thought busing was the thing when it happened. I can tell you, my father was a lawyer, was leading the Office of Civil Rights at what was then HEW. They thought it was the answer and that it was a civil rights thing that was going to make things better for all black children. And in hindsight, 50 years later, people have a very different view of what it was. Right? They were very proud of the work they were doing. They thought they were pushing things forward. They were providing equitable opportunities for kids who weren't getting them. We have to make sure, I mean, you can never have that vision 50 years later. But we have to keep very vigilant about what it is that we're doing, how we're designing it, who's at the table when we're designing it, that we are not kicking the sort of limitations down the road, that we're opening up the door in the front end and then we're blocking them at a management position. So that's going to require everyone to be really mindful of how it's designed, who comes in, how we think about it, the social networks and things that are built around students. We provide mentors. We have all kinds of, BRGs, the business resource groups that are around students. I say students, young people and adults who come in to work at IBM through different routes, but we have to be very, very careful about how this is done.
Well said.
Well said. Okay, well, I'm going to move us on to our next game, which is Mad Libs. So, listen carefully, please, panelists. Everyone's going to have a shot at this, and then we're going to discuss. Complete the following sentence. If my solution were to have any chance of replicating or being adopted at scale, it would require blank to blank because or else blank. Who wants to go first?
I can get started. I don't know if it's going to be completely perfect. So my solutions around the work of intermediaries. And those system actors that connect the dots between K-12, post-secondary, and workforce. And so ultimately, I believe that we need to build the capacity of those regional organizations to create more coherence in regional ecosystems, because if not, we're going to continue to perpetuate these siloed solutions, very disconnected, which means that we're not bringing about any change.
Good modeling, you said. Who wants to go next? Lydia?
Could you repeat the question?
If my solution were to have any chance of replicating or being adopted at scale, it would require blank to blank because or else blank.
If credentialing systems were going to have any chance of scaling, it would require the business community to accept and recognize other credentials universally, otherwise it won't work.
Woo. Woo. All right.
All right, I'm going to suggest dual enrollment has the beginnings of scaling and has potential to truly scale, but it requires additional awareness and policy change at state and local levels in order to be successful. Because otherwise, it will be reserved for the top 25% in the quartile and not truly open gateways to career and technical education and job skills.
All right. Paymon and Chris?
So jobs first higher education at scale would require raising greater awareness and valorizing non-traditional post-secondary pathways for young people so that there's greater demand, or I should say greater supply to align to the incredible demand that is in the labor market today. And so that is part of what we're striving to do here, which is to change hearts and minds and to make very clear that it's not this false choice that so many young people face, which is to either forestall income and accrue debt in pursuit of a traditional degree or forestall mobility and education to go work at the Verizon store. There is a third way solution, there's a both-and solution, and I think it begins with the changing of hearts and minds.
Chris, you want to play?
I do. And by the way, is Joel Vargas got a great future in game show hosting or what? The guy's awesome. He's got the voice. He had the idea. So if my solution were to work, Joel Vargas, no. I'm using the term bridge year for this idea of a one more year where students can go farther towards college and career success. And I'm using that bridge year because Issa gave me the idea to use that name yesterday. Much better than what we've been calling it under wraps, which is 13th year, which is terrible. So if my solution of a bridge year were to succeed at scale, it would require a shift in governance at both the local level and the state level, because as long as governance is aligned to institutions that like to be self-referential and self-focused, the institutional priorities will come ahead of the student priorities.
Let's give everyone a big hand. That was a tough one. Well done. And game show host was one of my early career choices, but so I get to live that out today. So we're going to close out. The closeout, we're going to play the game, oh no, well, it's called the closer, but we're going to say 3 words or less. But actually, I'm going to give you a little break and say, in 1 to 5 words, no more than 5, please, what is your call to action for everyone listening, or what should they do when they get back home to start achieving the transformation that our learners, workers, and economy need? So why don't we start down with Marty, and we'll just work our way here till the end.
So he said 5 words when he sent this out, and then he reduced it to 3.
You can do 5. You can do 5.
I think by no surprise for me when you go back home, because this is something you can actually do in your local community colleges, high schools, middle schools, and the like, which is drive dual enrollment pathways, not a singular, pathways.
I would say connected, coordinated, coherence, intermediaries.
Jobs first, higher education for all who choose it.
It works, it works. Lydia?
I'm off my number count, so just my word count. But for employers, eliminate degree requirements for jobs that don't really need them. There you go.
You said them fast, so that's what counts. Chris?
Make the goal college and career success, not readiness.
Oh. Brilliant.
At the risk of using one more second, I did 5, 6 words there. One thing I did realize we've left out in the discussion, I just want to say this word really briefly, is the incredible cultural shift we need towards coaching and guidance as
Yes.
well.
Yeah.
My colleague Daniel Noth will be speaking later today about a system where the majority of the money of the tuition is spent on coaching. We'll have to see changes like that to support students, not just spend
Plus
more on
one
the
to coaching.
educational. Yeah.
Thanks for noting that and making sure that it was said. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate your participation, your perspectives. Thanks, everyone, for playing our game. Have a great conference.